All right, everybody, on behalf of Reliant Title, want to welcome you guys to how to get back on track with your 2022 goals. As you know, we did business planning a while back, and one of the things that it seems like people always wait to do is look back at their year and see where they're at, and they usually wait for that until the next year of business planning. And by that point, it's obviously way too far. So I always like doing a class like this around the quarter, third of the year kind of checkpoint, to be able to make sure people don't get too far behind and get too far lost in their business plan. So not going to be too long of one today, but you're gonna leave with a plan, and I'm actually going to even give you guys a PDF in the Facebook group later today if you want to actually do all the activities that we cover today. So we're going to talk about kind of getting real with where you're at. We're going to talk about how to analyze the gap of where you're at versus where you're supposed to be. Then we're going to cover making a plan and then actually doing it. And then we'll wrap up with a summary. So I know everybody, so I'm going to skip all my fun intro stuff, and we will dive right into how to get back on track with your 2022 goals. So one of the things you'll know, or that you guys know, is I have that Facebook group. And one of the things I did over the weekend was kind of survey agents just to see where they were at, as well as asking friends and teams and offices and all that other fun stuff. And what I came up with from that survey is some crazy stats. What I found, and this is right out of my group. So there's about 13 or 1400 agents in that group now. So this is just based on their numbers. But what they said was that 71% of them are behind on their goals so far this year. So 71% of real estate agents, pretty big sample size, right? 1400. 19% are on track for their goals to actually hit their goals this year. And only 10% of them are ahead on the goals this year. And when I messaged all of the ones that were ahead and spoke to the ones that were ahead, I found something that was unique with all of them. None of them are actually ahead of their unit goal. So the deals they wanted to do, the number of deals they wanted to do, they're actually all behind as well. However, because the market is so crazy and the price points have blown up, they're ahead on their financial goal because the people that they're working with are paying over and, higher price. And that's making their numbers kind of artificially inflated. And it's always nice to make extra money, right? That's never a bad problem to have. However, what happens is people confuse that for success with their actual goal. And then when it comes down to it, when the market starts flattening out or things start getting harder, they'll be the ones that are in the most trouble, right? And we see this all the time. It's not just in the craziest market in history, but this happens very often when we get new agents or when somebody pops in. Because very often they will just come in, do one big deal or have two big deals, and that will, make their year look really good. However, they didn't build any systems or any habits or any lead generation machines. And then by the end of the year or early in the next year, you'll find those will be the same people that'll be out of the business or out of money. And I want to make sure that doesn't happen to any of you guys. So I'm curious where you are. You don't have to share, you don't have to tell me, but I'm just curious where you are. Just note it, find it kind of for yourself. Are you behind on your goals? Are you on track, or are you ahead? And if you're any one of the three of these, I want you to think about your goals in terms of units, not just money, because right now we are not really able to determine the money. The market's doing that for us. And very often, if we're working with a house or a buyer that might be buying or selling a $300,000 house, what happens? That deal ends up being $350,000. And that wasn't really something we did or we can control. However, that might make us an extra $1,500 or a couple $1,000. And that makes us artificially kind of think we're doing better than we really are. So I just want to make sure that you, first of all, you're kind of real with where you're at. And to make sure of that, I want you guys to kind of ask yourself some of these questions. And again, I'm not going to make you share this, but I really want you to be real with yourself. And I want you to think about the answers for you, not your neighbor, not as a group. So number one, are you behind? Yes or no, right? And you can write that down or put it in your phone or whatever. Number two is where you really need to do some soul searching. Why are you behind? Right? A lot of people right now are blaming inventory or the market or mortgage rates or whatever. However, when we look at the numbers, last year was the largest number of transactions ever recorded in the state of Florida. So we can't say that there weren't enough deals out there, right? Mortgage rates, obviously the last 6 months have just been getting uglier and uglier. It seems like every day they go up. However, we're still in a huge inventory shortage, and still more than 1,000 people a day are doing transactions in Florida. So that's not really the issue, right? Why are we behind? It usually boils down to us. Now, of course, there could have been an outside circumstance, family or health or something like that. but we need to look at our activities, right? And then think about how that makes you feel. And I don't want this to be a therapy session, but I want you to think for real. How does it make you feel that you're behind? Are you one of the people that just doesn't care or couldn't possibly care less? Because maybe when you did business planning or you came up with a goal, you just wrote down any number that sounded fun. Or does this bother you because you know what the future implications of this might be? And if you look at your goal or why you set that goal, you probably wrote that goal down for a reason. Usually people write 100,000 or 120,000 or 12 closings or 24 closings. Those are some pretty standard goals that people write. And when you look at that, that was attached to something, right? At some point you wrote that down for a reason. Maybe that money was to go on a vacation or pay off some debt or buy a house or buy a car or put your kid through college or a retirement fund or whatever it might be. But you have to really think, if you don't catch up on that goal, is that goal still important to you? And do you even want to catch up? And you really need to dive into that now. And I like working with people now, at the end of March, beginning of April, where we're between a quarter and a third of the way through the year, because you can look at your own numbers and you can still make a difference, right? If you do some of these exercises we're going to do today in October, November, it's too late. You're already stacking the deck for next year. However, we have plenty of time, and wherever you're at in your goals, I'm here to tell you that you're still okay, right? You can still easily catch up. When we do an exercise in a little bit, you'll find that I bet almost everybody in the room or everybody that's with you is somewhere between 1 and 3 closings behind where they want to be. And they're somewhere between 10 and 30,000 behind where they want to be. And both of those might seem overwhelming, but that is literally 1 month's worth of work, maybe even less. And we're going to make sure you get caught up there. Now, what I want you to think of is, do you want to catch up? And if you don't, I would imagine you wouldn't be on the call. So I'm just going to assume yes. Right. And you have to ask yourself, are you going to change the goal or are you going to change the plan? And to me, changing the goal is never the option because you wrote the goal down for a reason. So changing the plan is what you need to do. And that's what we're going to work on today. And that's what I really want you to leave with today. And because we are going to get out a little bit early today, I kind of want you to sit around the table there or, take a couple minutes, and instead of just bailing out early, I want you to actually do these exercises and focus on this. So number 2, the second section here is all about analyzing the gap. And I want you to either take out a piece of paper or your phone, because you're going to have to write 4 or 5 numbers down. And if you don't do this, the next part, you're just not going to be successful with. So I really would like everybody to play along and do this. It's going to be easy, I promise, but I just want everyone to do it. So I want us to do letter A first. I want everybody to write down what your goal was. And I either want that goal to be written down as units, meaning number of transactions, or dollars. And if you're playing along and you want to do a health goal or something like that, if it was weight loss or something, feel free to do that. But I want you to think about what your actual goal was and write that out. Was it a certain number of closings or was it a certain amount of income? And I want you to write that out. And whatever your goal was, I don't want you to fake this number, right? Whatever your goal was last year when we did business planning, October, November, December, whatever it was, I want you to write down what that goal was, not adjusted for today. I want you to write down what your goal was at the end of last year when you said 2022 is going to be my best year ever. I'm going to write down a number that I want to make or a number of transactions that I want to do. Write that number down and just put an A next to it. And then I want you to do the second part, which is going to give us answer B. And this is going to be where you are supposed to be now. So I want you to take your goal, or I want you to take letter A and divide it by 12. So if your goal was to do 12 closings, that's 1 a month, divide it by 12, right? That would be 1. And then multiply it by 4 because we're in the 4th month. So you'd be at 4. You're supposed to be at 4 closings right now. You should have 4 properties closed if your goal was 12. Now, if your goal was income, right? Let's say your goal was 120,000 because it makes the math easy. You should be at what? 40,000 of income now. So I just want you to write for letter B or for answer B here. I want you to write where you're supposed to be now. So letter A was what your goal was. And letter B is just a math problem that tells us where we're supposed to be. Now, letter C on the bottom in the middle, this is where sometimes this is painful, sometimes this is happy, but I want you to write where you're actually at. So if you did your goal based on units, I want you to write how many closings you actually have closed. I do not want you to count pending because they're not closed yet. So if you have 3 under contract, that's fantastic, but that doesn't count right now. How many do you actually have closed 118 days into the year? And if your goal was dollars, or if your goal at the beginning of the year was income or GCI or commission or whatever you like to call it, I want you to write down what you've earned, not what's on the books. If you got a 1099 right now, I want you to write down the number that it would say, not what you have anticipated, not a buyer that you have in your car that you know eventually will buy something, right? I want you to write down for letter C or answer C what you've actually earned. So C should be either units or it should be dollars. And then for section 4 here, I want to help understand what the gap is. So you're going to take B and then hit the minus sign and then put in C. Right? So if you were supposed to be at 4 closings already, but you've only had 2, your gap is 2, right? This is not that hard. If you were supposed to be at $40,000 of income, but you're only at 15, your gap is 25,000. All right. So everyone should have 4 sections completed, and then we're going to do the little bonus section, but everyone should have these 4 complete. Don't take off on this exercise. All right. Make sure you're doing this. So what was your goal? Should be answer A or section A. Where are you supposed to be? So take your goal, divide it by 12, and then multiply it by 4 is where you're supposed to be 4 months into the year. Where are you actually? How many units have you closed or how many dollars have you made? And then analyze the gap. Take C, subtract it from B. So B minus C equals your gap. Now, if you want to do the advanced section, I want you to talk about appointments, because appointments is really the only thing we can control, right? We can't control if something closes, and we really can't control the dollar amount that it closes at. But what you can determine is how many appointments you go on. So here's the way I think of appointments. And this part I don't really have written out. It's just kind of something in my head that I like to talk about. So here's how I think about appointments. If you are a newer agent, even if you're brand new, worst case scenario, your conversion rate is about 50%. So let's say your gap is 2 closings, right? You would need 2 appointments, buyer or seller appointments for each closing you want to have to ensure that you hit that. So if your gap is your 2 closings behind right now, multiply that number by 2, and you'll end up with 4 appointments. That's how many appointments would close your gap. And if your gap is a dollar amount, it's a little more confusing, but if your gap is a dollar amount, I want you to divide that dollar amount by your average commission, and it will come out to a smaller number, likely with a decimal. You're going to round that decimal up and then multiply that by 2 for the 50% conversion rate. So example, if your gap, let's say your gap was $20,000, you're 20,000 off where you want to be, and your average commission is 8,000, right? So it would take us 2 and change closings to hit our gap. So we would round that up to 3. And then we'd multiply that by 2 to give us 6 for the appointment number that will close the gap. So everyone should now have 5 numbers or 5 either dollar amounts or 5 units on their page. A should be what your goal was, either dollar or units. B is where you should be, dollar or units. C is where you are actually, dollar or units. Your gap between where you want it to be and where you actually are. And then D, or the last section, is going to be how many appointments will close that gap. So everyone should have 5 numbers written down. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a plan. So we need to actually make an action plan or a business plan that we can work on. So I want you to ask yourself a couple questions again. Number one of the things I always push, or I really like to get agents to work on, is having 3 priorities for their lead generation. This doesn't mean you can never do anything else. However, what I find is most people's business come entirely from 1 to 3 sources, and you should know those. And maybe you get a lot of business from 1 or 2, and you're focusing on another one because you want to add one, and that's great. But do you have your 3 lead generation priorities in order? Are you focusing every day on between 1 and 3 things? So maybe you work on database, FSBOs, and expireds. Maybe those are the 3 that you like, or maybe it's open houses and circle prospecting and internet leads, or whatever yours are. It doesn't matter, but everyone should have 3. Write those down, the 3 that you focus on, and then be honest with yourself. How have they been working so far this year? And that's a simple analysis, right? You look at your closings that you've had so far this year, the money that you've made, and just trace them back. So if you've had 3 closings, was 1 database, 1 FSBO, and 1 expired, or were all 3 database and the other 2 we didn't even touch? Whatever the answer is fine. This is just analyzing where you're at and being real with yourself where you're at. There's no wrong answer. There's no sadness here. This is just very honest assessment of your business. And if you can't be honest with yourself and look at it, you can never get better. Right? So ask yourself how they've been working, and also ask yourself, have you been pushing them as hard as you could? So if one of your strategies is expireds and you have no closings from expireds this year, but you also haven't made one phone call to expireds this year, it's not the expired's fault, right? It's your fault, but that's okay. It's not the end of the world, but at least we're recognizing where we're at. And that's what I want you to do right now, is understand what your 3 lead generation priorities are. Understand if they're working. So can you directly track a deal back to one of these sources? There should never be a deal you do that you can't track back to a lead source, right? And then the ones that haven't maybe done deals this year, or the lead priority that hasn't given you a deal this year, just find out, is it the lead strategy or is it you? So let's say you do have expireds and that's your 3rd lead generation priority, and you've called 100 expireds a day every day this year. So you've made, 10,000 phone calls this year, and you haven't gotten one deal or one closing out of it. It's time to switch, right? We need to change that one because that's either not for you, or you don't have the right scripts, or you're not enjoying it, or whatever. But if yours is expireds and you've made no phone calls, it might not be the expireds, right? You need to change what you're doing. You need to change your actions. And either way, that's okay. And then I want you to think of what 5 action steps can you do that will catch up. So here's what we're going to do. And I'm going to give you this 1-page little 30-day business plan that I love. For me, anytime I get behind on something, whether it was in my office or my team or in our title companies or whatever, I know we're always a 30-day massive action push away from catching up, especially when we're early in the year and we're not that far back. So this is what I want you to think of. And I'll put this business plan in my Facebook group tonight when I'm done with all the Zooms. But I want you to have one of these. If you're behind right now, there's only 3 sections you could be focusing on, and it's an all-out push for 30 days. So that means if we have vacations booked, or we usually are going to brunch, or going out every weekend, or going to happy hour every night, but we're behind on our goals, for 30 days, we just wipe that stuff out, we get caught up, and then we can go right back to brunch, right? So how many appointments do you need to catch up on your goal? If you did the exercise earlier, you know that. For most people, I would guarantee it's between like 2 and 10. And even if it's 10, there's 20 working days in a month, right? So that would be an appointment every other day. Or if you're working every day of the month, every 3rd day an appointment, which is like nothing, right? That should not be a problem. Then we're going to look at our 3 lead generation priorities, and we're going to clearly define those. So what are they? If we looked at them before in that last set of questions and we realize we need to change one, that's fine, but we need to have 3. There's no reason at this point in the year you should not have 3 lead generation priorities. If you've gotten this far in the year and maybe you only had 2 and you're behind, that's okay. You tried it your way. So what I'm asking you to do is try it mine now, and come up with what 3 lead generation priorities you're going to focus on. And if there's one in there that you've had before that you just don't like, or you've had limiting beliefs around, I'm totally cool with you getting rid of it. It's fine. It needs to be 3 things, though, that you're going to focus on, that you're actually going to work on. And then we're going to come up with 5 action steps. So I'm going to type some examples in the chat and I'll kind of talk through them. So let's say, how many appointments do you need to catch up on your goal? Let's say it was 6, right? 6 appointments is what we're missing. Then our 3 lead generation priorities. Maybe 1 is database, right? 2 is FSBOs. Every time I type FSBO, it tries to autocorrect it. And number 3 is expireds. All right. So for section 2 there, your 3 lead generation priorities, we're just going to write out what our 3 are. And whatever yours are is totally cool. But the big thing here is going to be 5 action steps. And these 5 action steps need to be something that you are not only able to, but also willing to complete in 30 days. This is not an annual business plan. You have one of those already. The goal of this is to get back on track. So we need 5 action steps that are massive, right? These are going to be big action steps. It's not going to be called 1 FSBO a day, right? These are going to be big action steps that if we take over the next 30 days, there's no way we don't get back in line. So let's think about number 1, 5 action steps. If our one of our lead generation priorities is database, action step number 1 could be call entire database and ask for business. So here's what this would look like. You would call your database and say, hey, it's Ryan over at XYZ Realty. And I know we haven't chatted in a while, but this is a business call. I'm a little bit behind on my goals, and I'm curious, do you have any real estate plans for the rest of 2022 that I can help you with? When are you planning on taking advantage of the hottest real estate market in history? And just ask them that, right? If you really did that as an action step, you called your whole database, whether that's 60 people, 600, or 6,000, it would be a miserable 30 days, right? It's not going to be fun, especially if you have 6,000 people to call. However, there's no possible way you can't drum up an appointment or a piece of business out of that. Then number two, action step number two, anyone that didn't answer, we're going to text and do the same thing. So normally what will happen is if you made 100 phone calls, only somewhere between 20 and 30 people would answer. So that means you have somewhere between 70 and 80 that did not answer. So we're going to text those people the same thing, the same script, right? When do you plan on taking advantage of the hottest real estate market in history? It's time. If you were thinking about selling, prices are all-time high. It's time. If you were thinking about buying, prices are chasing up and so are rates. You need to buy now before it's too late. If you are renting, you're crazy. It's time to buy something, right? Rent rates are going insane and they're only going to get worse. So those could be two action steps that are tied to priority number one, right? Then next we have FSBOs. Okay, so our third action step might be visit, like in person, every FSBO on the market. Now you might be thinking that that's crazy, but if you went on Zillow and looked at all the FSBOs in your county, I guarantee it's less than 100. I bet it's actually less than 50. So you have 30 days to go and visit all of these. Now, we're not talking about calling or sending a text or a Facebook message or a tweet, right? We're going to actually go and visit these people. We're going to go talk to them. Remember, we're behind on our goals. We're doing a 30-day business plan to make sure that we catch up, right? This is not airy-fairy rainbows and butterflies. This is massive action to get there. All right, the number four, let's say we're working on the expired one now. Number four, we're going to call new expireds every day. If you're not doing that or want to learn about these, by the way, next week I'm doing an expired class. Make sure you're there. And then number five might be to hit all the old expireds in your zip code. All the ones that haven't sold in 10 years. Every expired that has expired in the last 10 years but haven't sold. Now, if you look at these, right, I picked the lead generation priorities. They might be the same as yours. They might not be, but everyone should have database. And I'm sure someone is working FSBOs or expireds. But when we look at these action steps, I want you to think how massive they are. And if you're creating your 30-day business plan, yours needs to be massive as well. So don't make an action step that's, maybe your thing is open houses. Great. That's your priority. Don't make your action step, do one open house. That's not massive enough to get us back caught up, right? We need to take some massive action just for 30 days. Because what will happen is, first of all, if you actually do all five of these action steps that we just put in the examples, there's literally no possible way you couldn't get caught up. And the other good thing is when you take this massive action, you call your whole database, you text your whole database, you visit in person every FSBO on the market, you call every new expired, and you call every old expired. There's also no possible way you can't add stuff to the pipeline that's going to close later in the year to make sure that not only are you back on track after these 30 days, but you're setting yourself up for success for the rest of the year because you just filled your pipeline. So the good thing, what I love about the 30-day business plan is that wherever you're at, it is early enough in the year where you can catch up. So you don't need to beat yourself up that you're behind or have a sad story or mope around. It's okay, right? You have plenty of time to catch up. Now, what's tough about this is it requires massive action. But the good news is if we do that massive action now between April and May, before the kids are even out of school or we realize it's summer and we want to take a minute off, we're caught up. We're going to be ahead of where we needed to be. And it's not too late in the year. I do not want you guys waiting to October or November to realize that you're behind and then try and figure it out. So once we create that 30-day business plan, all that's left is to do it, right? We just need to take massive action. We need to get out there and go put what we learned or what we created into action. If that goal was important to you, the good news is there's plenty of time to catch up. And in just 30 days, you can be back on track. So in summary, it's not too late. I'm glad we did this call early enough in the year. We're right now, we're pretty much right between a quarter of the way and a third of the way through the year, right? At the end of this month will be a third of the way through the year. So whatever your numbers look like now, even if they're all goose eggs, right? If they're all zeros, it's okay. You still have plenty of time to catch up. Do not let this keep slipping. Don't let this go till June or July and then try to catch up, because the project that you have to overcome just becomes impossible, right? The mountain to climb just gets ridiculous. But when we're a quarter or a third of the way through the year, no matter where you're at now, right? If you're 20 closings behind, you still have 8 months left. That's 3 closings a month. That's not a big deal, right? You can do it. So whatever your number is right now, don't be embarrassed or don't be down on yourself, right? Probably my guess is all of us on the call are down where we want to be, right? Or at least 3 out of every 4 of us are down where we want to be. So that's okay. Don't beat yourself up, but we need to take massive action. And the best way to do that is just in 30-day stints, right? Or 30-day sprints. It's very, very hard to take that 30-day action plan and sustain that over the whole year, right? It's really almost impossible. However, you could grind it for 30 days, get caught up, and you'll be fine. You're just not going to sustain that the rest of the year. So make sure you do it once, get caught up. And then if, in the third or fourth quarter, you need to do it one more time to get caught up, you're fine and you're there. 2 good 30-day pushes or 1 good 30-day push will set you up for the rest of the year. As always, thank you guys for your business. I appreciate it. We are starting to work on a day to get there in May or June. So hopefully I will see you guys again somewhere. Well, I definitely will see you guys again somewhere in the next 60 days. I'm hoping by the end of the week, this week, we will have the next opportunity for a day for you guys, and I will let you know. Carrie, thank you as always for the slides and making everything look nice. We appreciate it. Coming up next week, we are doing the return of the expired listing. I'm so happy to be doing this now because it's something that people are not paying attention to. But in the state of Florida, 6 consecutive weeks in a row, there have been more expireds than the week before. So what's happening is we are slowly starting to see the return of the expired listing. The good thing is that no one is noticing it except the numbers nerds like me. No one's paying attention to it. No one's talking about it. And I want to make sure you guys have that opportunity to get your unfair share. So next week, we're going to talk expireds. We're going to talk stats in the beginning. And then I'm going to give you a bunch of scripts and strategies to just go put into play. So every personality or no matter how you like to handle the phone or whatever with expireds, you'll be able to do that. So join us next week for that one. And as always, if you need anything, feel free to reach out. If you're not in the Facebook group yet, get in there. At the end of the day today, at some point, I will put that 30-day business plan in there for you. So if you guys want to download that or take it and use it, you can. If you have any questions, either throw them in the chat or unmute yourself. And if not, or if you need anything else, let me know. If not, you guys are free. Go make that